Hello, and welcome to this lecture entitled Your Historical Research Project. I want to open with a short discussion of the types of research papers that exist: narration, description, analysis, and argument. Whether your writing experience is great or small, most of the writing you've done for class has been narrative or descriptive. Fiction, which probably constitutes much of your academic reading and writing experience, is about storytelling, narration, and character or scene development, description. I suspect this has been your experience in writing nonfiction research-based papers as well. Narration and description are fine, but it's time to take the next step in your writing experience: analysis and argument. Simply put, analysis is, as political scientist and research methods professor Raul Pacheco says, to contrast what the historical literature on your topic says with your own empirical research. While argument is making a claim about the meaning of your research findings that you support with assertions and evidence. Academics call this kind of writing thesis-driven. You've heard and used the word thesis before, usually as a thesis statement. Often, to this point, your thesis statements have described the contents or directions your paper will take. Thus, they have actually been topic statements that have summarized the substance of your papers. The next step definition of thesis is claim. In an analytical, argumentative paper, your thesis is the claim you make about your research findings, and you support this claim with both assertions and evidence. You use description and narration as part of this evidence and to establish context. You also use narration to weave your findings together in order to construct an interesting and compelling argument. But the most important thing to do is write a clear thesis, claim, construct a clear structure that supports your claim. These are assumptions and reasons, that is, interpretive statements that must be true for your claim to be true, and that look and act like claims for subsections of your argument, and support these assumptions by evidence. Often, you write your thesis claim clearly only after you've written a draft of your paper, for it's only then that it becomes clear to you what you're really trying to say and what your evidence supports. I hope during your time in school that one of your language arts teachers introduced you to the so-called 5-paragraph style of writing. In essays of 5 paragraphs, you can take the title literally, but in longer works, including research papers, think in terms of sections. In the 5-paragraph style, you have one paragraph of introduction that occupies 20% of your paper, a 3-paragraph body that occupies 60%, and a 1-paragraph conclusion that occupies the final 20%. In a thesis-driven analytical research paper, you have 4 sections: your introduction, your historiography or lit review, which both together should cover about 25 to 30% of the paper, the body, which still covers about 60%, and the conclusion that comes in at 10 to 15%. Now, these numbers are just vague guidelines, of course. Figuring out what each part of the paper contains is separate from how you construct the argument that forms the core of your research report. Let's look at these sections now. Your introduction contains 2 subsections, potentially. One is the hook. The hook is a short story that eases your readers into your writing. It's a rhetorical device and it is not required, but it's a good place to identify your intended audience and connect with them. More important is the thesis statement. This is your claim. Your thesis statement probably will be more than 1 sentence, but it should be a concise statement of what it is you're trying to prove, quote unquote, in your argument. It can be that X is better than Y, or that things happen in a particular order or for particular reasons, or it can be something else. Your claim comes from your research question, something you generate for yourself. The second section of your research report is the historiography. This section we also call the literature review. In it, you tell your readers where your claim and research fits into the academic conversation. This is the basis for your analysis. This is to say, you answer the question of what do authors who have written on your topic say. You only need to include those authors who are most important to your own argument. You might include authors who do disagree with you so that you can argue against them. The body of your paper is where you make your assertions and present your evidence, much of which is narrative and descriptive. Divide your paper into topical subsections. Don't make the mistake of trying to deal with each assertion in a single paragraph. You will have a number of assertions. They will require multiple paragraphs to make them sensible and to provide the evidence that supports them. Deal with each assertion as well as context that sets the stage as multi-paragraph mini-essays. In your drafts, give each topical subdivision a heading and insert an extra space below and above. Take these headings and spaces out later. Each topical subdivision will be of a different length. Don't worry about that. Paragraphs rather than sentences are the basic thought unit of a research paper. This means each paragraph has to make sense as an entity. Occasionally, you'll have to write a paragraph to transition from one line of thought to another. These are called transition paragraphs. But generally, your paragraphs support part of your argument by exposing your evidence and rhetorically tying it into your argument so your evidence does not just stand alone. Paragraphs contain a transition to tie it to the paragraph above. Sometimes you'll add a transition at the end of a paragraph to tie it to the one that comes after. Paragraphs also contain a topic sentence so your reader will understand what the paragraph is about. When you add your evidence pertinent to the paragraph's topic, and then you explain how the evidence fits into the argument. Let me give you an example. Assume my wife said to me, "You'll want to wear a jacket on our walk this morning." This is her topic sentence. "You'll find it's uncomfortably cool out there." This is an assertion. "The Weather Channel reports it's 45 degrees and I see from the trees there's a slight wind." This is evidence. We know from experience that you complain about being uncomfortable if you're dressed too lightly, no kidding, in such conditions. This is further evidence. A jacket will give you another layer of protection and make you more comfortable. This is restating the thesis in a different way and tying the assertion that she made to the claim. You end your paper with a conclusion. Begin your conclusion with a summary of your argument and evidence, including at least the high points. Also, tie the components of your argument and evidence together. This is to say, summarize your whole argument. When summarizing your argument, remember to restate your claim. You shouldn't use the exact language as you stated in your thesis, but use similar language. Remember the ideas, assertions, evidence, and connections that are obvious to you are not obvious to readers. So you, the author, have the responsibility to guide the readers through your argument. Hold them by the hand and lead them to the conclusion that you believe is correct and that you have argued with integrity. Now, some things do not belong in a conclusion. Avoid introducing new evidence that you've not examined in the report's body. Also, writers often feel like they need to bring the story up to date, so they write epilogues rather than conclusions. In a fairy tale, an epilogue is the "and they lived happily ever after" part. Now, you can insert an epilogue either before or after the conclusion, but it does not substitute for a well-crafted conclusion. So let me begin my lecture's conclusion with a pro tip. Read your paper aloud, preferably to an audience. Then rewrite it. After that, rewrite it again. Then redraft your conclusion and your introduction. Until you rewrite the paper 2 or 3 times, introductions and conclusions are mere speculation. You are ready to take the next step in writing by adding analysis and argument to your repertoire that already includes narration and description. Remember that analysis means you compare your interpretations of the evidence with what other authors have written. And argument means you construct a claims, assertions, evidence model in your research report to make your case that your analysis is correct. To accomplish this, your research report will have 4 sections: an introduction, the historiography, the body, and a conclusion. It is your job not only to be clear in what you think and write, but also to be interesting and compelling. You have the floor. Proceed. This ends the lecture, and as always, thank you for your attention.